Welcome to Customer Value and Beyond. My name is Steven Lewandowski, and I'm honored to have you with us today. We bring you insights from decades in tech, B2B, SaaS, and customer success, sharing real stories, answering your burning questions, and exploring new ways to drive real customer value. The show is live streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube with recordings available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And today I'm excited to introduce Gaurav Sharma. Gaurav is the product leader for value tools and AI systems at ServiceNow, where he focuses on transforming how enterprise software moves from promised value in the sales cycle to proven value post-sale through telemetry and data systems. Gaurav, welcome to the show. Why don't you jump in and tell us a bit about yourself and what keeps you busy these days at ServiceNow? Hi.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me. So I have been working with ServiceNow, been in value space for over 8 years. I started my journey as a field-facing value consultant, working with sellers, quantifying outcomes, building business cases, and support the executive discussions and decision making. And then over time, my focus has been shifted from work instead of working on a single value engagement, work towards scaling the value services across the organization. So my focus is to operationalize value across whole organization via system, content systems, tooling, and on now building AI agents for the seller community. My goal is to make sure that the value is consistent across the organization and it's accessible by anybody within the organization. Even a field facing value consultant is not tied to that engagement or that opportunity.
Love it. And I think it's one of the rare occasions where we actually will dive quite deep into the topic of value engineering itself and tooling, right? Because we've had a few people on from the sales side, from the product side, also from the customer success side, mostly always focused on go-to-market processes in B2B SaaS, for example, right? And I think you mentioned that in the preparation of the episode, you mentioned that you're also quite deep into the community of also value engineers, and you also told me a little bit about an event you attended recently, which we will probably also get into a bit later. So to maybe allow everybody to get to know you also a little bit better. And everybody out there, forgive me if I look a bit like a tomato. It's a bit warm in here. We don't have AC and it's pretty hot in Berlin. So do you have something where people would be surprised about? Is there something about your profile that people don't know? Because everybody, of course, went to your LinkedIn and said, oh, who's Gaurav and what can I learn from him? So what is he an expert in? But is there something else, something, maybe a little fun fact people might not know about you?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, like a lot of people who know me, who have worked with me would know, but I really enjoy, like professionally, I really like to, uh, whenever I work, try to, break down the complex problem into simpler ways. So that's just because, because of my background, I work, was an engineer and then I worked in digitizing government organizations. So I had to work with technical people and the customers who are government employees doesn't understand that. So understand the technology, understand the different perspectives and break down the complex problems or complex narratives to the different audience is something that I really enjoy. And outside professional life, I follow chess a lot. So if you have read my article, so I try to put some chess analogies into my articles, that that can, I try to merge those with the kind of work that I'm doing in the value space.
Nice. I saw that. And the question um, is there something you learned playing chess, which you regularly kind of try to squeeze or knit into your everyday activities in customer value management? Is there something where you
Yeah.
think like, okay, because I'm a good chess player, this actually makes me a better value expert?
Yeah, I mean in chess it's it's a basic thing where you have to think about moves pretty ahead of time. Like you should know, like when you are, doing a move, what opponent is going to do, and think through, like, next, depending on your skill set, how many, future move you can think of when you are doing a single move. So I would say that that really helped me to see, like how the value systems or content system that I'm building, I'm making them future proof, right? Like how I can make sure that the capability or feature or anything that I'm putting in is future proof, and won't break in the future if something change in the value model, or on the telemetry or something like that. So I always think ahead whenever, building something, so that it shouldn't get outdated in next few months. It should stay, right, for few years.
Love it. And since that has probably helped you also build processes, and processes probably also help you like kind of get a full understanding, right, of the like tactics and strategies that kind of get you forward. Your career took a bit of a turn when you basically became from a value engineer, right? You came into the area of like processes and improvements. And since you sit at the intersection of like the product telemetry, data systems, customer value realization, right, which all come into play, how does the definition of value differ between a product engineer looking at feature adoption and an executive buyer looking at ROI? Do they speak the same language, or are we dealing with two very different currencies of success there?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just on that. Both products or data engineer side and sellers or executives, they talk about the same journey, but they are talking about the different currencies, right? Like product teams, they focus on the telemetry, on the activity side, like how many, password resets that happened, right, by customer, how many tasks were automated. So they care about those metrics, which is more like activity. However, executives or a buyer, would care about metrics like, cost reduction, productivity gains. So both perspectives are not wrong, they are different. But I think the missing piece is, the linking between two perspectives, right? They should have a layer in between that can translate, like how that particular activity translated into, the metrics, or the operational metrics, or the financial metric that executives care about. If something has, there are more automated tasks, for example, as an activity, if that is increasing over time, what is the impact to the revenue? What is the impact in my capacity? So that is a translation that need to happen, which is where value taxonomy is pretty crucial, that can translate, in between activity to operational metrics to business outcome to the strategy, metrics that a lot of executives care about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And since we pinched a little bit this topic of the ROI, oftentimes when you look at websites of vendors, right, to maybe dig into that a bit deeper, you see like ROI calculators, right, on websites, and sometimes also in sales teams, you see these ROI calculators. Is there, for you, right, from your perspective, is there a direct connection between like an ROI calculator and the business cases that you saw teams actually use in practice? Is there a connection, or would you say that's two completely different games?
Like these tools basically help you to have a ROI conversation. Definitely help sellers to use those tools and build the narrative, talk about ROI with the customer. So there is a linking that I would say that exists there.
And how would you, because with the ROI calculator, we're oftentimes in the sales environment, right? So we're probably using that as a business case to get the deal off the ground, to convince the stakeholders to get the budget approved and all that. how is that then tied to the value realization in the end, right? Because that's where what customers actually care about, right? So how do I get the value actually on track? How do I get an ROI out of this? So how do you connect then this initial calculated ROI to the realization?
Yeah. So that's where, like I have seen, like over time, which is a big challenge, is you in the pre-sale side, you build a business case, and then conversation just stops there, right? And sometimes when it moves to customer success, like for implementation and maintenance, it is just that business case that is handed over. There is no underlying system that now track the promise that was made to the customer, right? Like, now I promise you some outcomes. How do you measure it? If there is no system, so there will be so much difficult in the post sale side to see what was promised is being, is been met or not. So that's why the way business case connect to the value realization side is, with the business case you need to have some certain value system, a tracking mechanism underlying that tracks, that connect those outcomes that is promised to the success metrics that system contain. And then on the basis of the change in those operational metrics, then you talk about value achieved or not achieved, or that kind of conversation. So that there is a need of a underlying system that connect that business case to the value realization.
And when you use the word promised, right? And I think the promised and expectation management, those are terms we kind of use regularly, right? Because we work with customers and we try to get the what we promised actually on the ground, and there's a lot of expectation management involved. But sometimes also that doesn't work out in the end, right? And many software buyers also probably had experiences which weren't perfect in the end, right? So in your work, is there sometimes also, or did you see a credibility problem also sometimes rather than just a tooling problem? So where sales has to build trust for customers when presenting like value dashboards and their value cases. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, I mean, building a value dashboard, and presenting to customer is not equivalent to, building the credibility, right? You can build a pretty dashboard, a pretty tool, and it's still not credible unless you have validation from the customer. So to build that credibility, the most important thing is first, like, the it should be so much transparency, right? Like, if you build something, some logic of tying a business outcome to a success metric, customer should be able to understand what logic is, what you are trying to measure, right? All those stuff. So that is one piece. There has to be transparency. Then second thing is traceability, where you build an underlying linking of a metric to the outcome, how that is traceable to the actual product signal, like that activity. So that traceability should be there. And then it should be consistent. It shouldn't be different the pre-sales and different the post-sales. Should be consistent in the two phases. And then you need to be validated with the customer, like the value model that you have built on top of it. It should be validated. All the assumptions should be validated. And then, yeah, I mean, those are the few things that help you build that overall credibility.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think some of that can also be or get lost also through the journey the customer takes through your company, right? And what we oftentimes see is also a bit of a friction between different disciplines and organizations or teams, right? So sometimes we call it like silo building, right? And silos that are created, and in those frictions. So most companies, they have some kind of like pre-sales function and a sales function, and they are trying to sell the value, right? But many of these organizations we talked about also struggle then to prove that, right? So prove the value post-sales. Where do you think that originates from? Do you where do you think is like the biggest disconnect in between what was promised in the beginning and what then should be delivered in measurable value?
Yeah. So I think all these different teams, right? Like sellers, they own building the value hypothesis, right? Building the business case, the pre-sale side. Uh, there is customer success that on implementation, right? And yeah, value realization, proving that what was promised has been achieved. And then other teams like product teams, they own the product capabilities, product signals, all the telemetry. So they own different pieces. There are different lenses to that, but none of them own the whole life cycle, right? Nobody own the end-to-end journey, value journey for that customer. So that's what I feel that cause the biggest disconnect, and it shows like disconnected value to the system, or to the customer. If customer is in the different phases of the system, it picks different type of view of value, right? So what we need to do is build a system that connect all these from the activity to outcomes, to like strategic priorities, and the value that customer is getting. So we have to we need a system that connect all this. That way your business case that you created in the pre-sale cycle is not a document anymore. It's a live system which is changing with the telemetry, with the product
Mhm.
signal. And it's not a point in time kind of a value conversation. It's always happening, right? It's changing. And customer doesn't have to wait for whole QBR to know like what value I'm getting. It's basically, yeah, it's always there. You can always track that.
And you mentioned who would own that, right? So there's an end-to-end responsibility technique around that, right? So what we at Addressable Value always say is that this needs to be an end-to-end discipline, right? So there needs to be an understanding of what is the business case initially and what actually helps you realize that value, right? And different people think differently about how to realize that. We consider value plans, some kind of like value plan to be like the key to tackle that, right? Which incorporates a value plan, which incorporates a business case, but also helps you then expand on customers in the end. And where we saw and where we learned a lot about that is like in hyper growth SaaS environments where you just need to be able to scale that approach across like numerous customers, which you also, of course, saw in your larger organizations. But since you mentioned the ownership, we had an episode last year with Dave Jackson, who wrote the book on customer-led growth, right? So for scale-ups and larger companies, how to actually leverage your customer relationships to grow out of your existing customer base. We joked around that there should be a chief value officer in each company, and where he challenged that thought after a bit by saying, shouldn't the CEO be the chief value officer in the end? Right? There was a bit of a funny discussion we had around that. What is your thought? Where would you see that responsibility actually lie? Who would you think have the capability, overview, and insights to actually be able to own such an end-to-end customer value journey? Or do you have examples where you saw that actually can work well?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of ownership, I mean, usually people say that, like, right, like that, what I have seen in other organizations, that customer success should be doing, or owning the value realization. But I believe that they can lead the conversation with the customer, no doubt with
Mhm.
that, because post sale you're having a renewal conversation, right? For example, one value motion. But they are not the only one owning that value realization, right? It's a collective thing where product team care about you know product metrics, operational metrics. So they build that telemetry, they instrument that, right? Like, of course, value team can work with product team, product BUs, to build that instrumentation layer, you know. So, but like they care about product feature and product capabilities. The sellers are building the business cases, right? Value team is building all those economic models, value models, that narrative, scale services, and all that stuff. And customer success is utilizing all those stuff that these teams are building, but leading that conversation. It's not like they're just owning only, they're leading it, but everyone else is helping them to lead that
Mhm.
conversation with the customer. So that's what I think and I believe.
And times are changing a bit, right? So, and you are very busy looking into processes, data, probably also AI nowadays, right? So, where do you see AI having a big impact, especially on that story, right? Because a lot what we talked about was scaling, but also leveraging the data. What is one thing AI can brilliantly help with during that process? Is it tracking customer value day to day? Is it collecting and capturing that business case? Where do you see AI having a big impact? And maybe it's numerous topics.
Yeah, I mean, AI is pretty good in the synthesizing of the information, right? You put a lot of information, customer context, some data elements, some telemetry maybe. It can create initial value hypothesis very quickly, like give all the conversations that you had with the customers, all that context. It will generate pretty fast the value hypothesis that save you a lot of time, being a seller, value consultant, whoever using that AI. So, and you can tweak the narrative based on the persona that AI can do very well. So if you are speaking with C-2 level, right, VP level, can create that narrative. If you are going above, speaking to CIO, you tweak that narrative. So AI can do very well. So these are a few areas where it can generate like your initial hypothesis based on the different or a lot of data points. It can generate very quickly and save you a lot of time.
And do you see that also being helpful in guiding value engineers, guiding sales or customer success in that conversation? Is there also a process aspect of like helping scale that? Did you see something there as well?
Yeah, definitely. You can, it will help you in terms of having your, before discovery, or you can use AI to build that uh, outside in perspective before going to that meeting very quickly. Whether you are a seller or a value consultant being tied to that deal, and this is the first time you are working on that, and AI can be made deterministic to be a sales coach for you. Like always the same time when you give same input, generate same output. It can do that. It needs some work, but it can do that. But even if it is not deterministic, it's probabilistic, have some data architecture underlying that agent or skill that you have built on based of that, you can have pretty solid discovery with that help before you get into that meeting with the customer. I would
Right.
say that like can do a lot of things, but certain areas such as like building the value models is something that I wouldn't rely on AI. It's because it's probabilistic behavior, but when we are building these value model, it has to be deterministic in a way that for every input that you are giving, it generates the same output, right? So I would still need uh, value logic, quantification logic being built by value consultants as an underlying layer, make the agent interpretation, right? Like web search for the customer priorities, where they are going, 10Ks and all. So that can be on top of that, but the quantification should be uh, by a value consultant. And then once that is done, then we need a human judgment on top of that, which is where again, when the decisions have to be made or a negotiation have to be made, tweak some certain things, that is where again human judgment is required. So we see that architecture in three layers, like you have quantification value logics being built by value experts, AI interpretation the second layer, and then the third layer is the human interpretation on top of it.
Love that. And I think it kind of confirms also what we've been seeing, right? So what we've been doing also when we work with customers building their value frameworks, that's a workshop, right? So that's sometimes multiple workshops and working with customers closely to identify what's your value drivers, right? What's your value metrics? What can we actually track, and build a sophisticated framework around that? And that's what we also use then later in our software, basically, right? So if you work with us, where your framework will then actually be the filter, right? Everything that goes through, every business case is created, needs to go through that framework. So you actually make sure that you also leverage the value drivers that actually make you a strong offering, which I think is important, and can help you with that. And speaking of that, right? So you, in our prep call, you mentioned also that you, and I forgot to mention that you're actually calling in from Boston, so which is great. And you mentioned that you went to New York recently and were part of an exciting new kind of event. And I heard it was like one of the very first value-focused events. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what was maybe something where you thought, okay, this is something where the industry is moving towards, and what was confirmed there?
Yeah, no, yeah. So it was a great event. Like I mentioned, got opportunity to meet with old friends and see, how others organization are doing in the value space, and also got opportunity to share some perspectives there. So overall, it was great opportunity to network, to learn, and share your perspectives all along. And yeah, the thing that I observed, like AI, like you mentioned, is I mean, it's not a buzzword anymore. We are going to see, every organization leveraging AI over time, even in the value. So I think the biggest takeaway for me was like this buzzword of AI enabled or AI, focused workflows. Like it's gonna go away. It's not gonna be anything about like, are we going to use it? It's not going to be that question. Everybody's going to use that. Question will be leveraging those AI workflows, what value we are now gonna get. So that is something that's gonna change. It's not gonna be about whether we are using it or not. It's gonna be like how much and which are the areas where we are gonna get value when we use AI backed, workflows.
Yeah, and I think that's already like a great look into the future, right? Because I think that is actually something which we will see, and what we already see nowadays, right? So we've been working with a few AI native companies as well, right? Which are at the moment, especially for the last 2 years, been enjoying quite a bit of inbound business coming their way, right? So companies just jumping on the AI bandwagon and trying to find use cases. But we see quite a bit of momentum there in terms of having to focus now also on the outbound motions, having to focus on proving the value actually of AI, right? And I think that is actually quite a tough nut to crack, especially in the AI space, to make sure that all companies understand what their value actually is. And I remember at a recent event, somebody also mentioned something like that AI makes each and every one more efficient, right? But in the end, overall, it doesn't create organizational efficiency, right? More like individual efficiency. So what's your thought on how that will further develop, especially also for AI native companies? And what do you think about like the ROI of AI? Is it tougher to prove than for typical SaaS vendors?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what I also think, that it is tougher to explain. I think what you mentioned, right? AI, it is very difficult to track where actually, or what all organization or processes are being impacted with the introduction of AI in one area. You introduce something in one area. Let's say you improve one process. Okay, you can prove the value, for that particular area, but it's going to have ripple effect on other areas now. So when you are monetizing the value, or try to understand the value of that change in a certain task or certain area or certain process, you have to be thinking ahead or beyond that process, where which are other areas now gonna get improved as well. So if, for example, you added some automation and you made some changes in customer service process pretty fast, but what does that mean? Like, you can monetize that, but it's gonna impact other areas as well. So you have to track those other areas and then include in the value of AI. So that is the difficult part, I would say, in order to track like the ripple effect of one change into a process, into the different processes that it's going to have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And think about that further, right? So if you would, and that's a bit of a look into the future, right? So how would, with all these developments, your ideal value journey look like, right? If you could paint a picture of this is how we would sell, this is how we prove value, this is how we realize value. If you would need to describe your fantastic idea of a process and a value journey, how would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I right now we see a lot of a big wall between pre-sales and post-sale. So that is something that I feel like ideally over time, I think if we build, like instead of static business case, if we build a dynamic value operating system underlying, that way you create a business case and it's not a single document. It's a living document that changes, with customer as customer matures over time. And it's not static anymore. It's a dynamic, and it's not a one-time kind of a discussion. It's like it's a continuous discussion, and it's always available. So I think that's the ideal thing. We break that wall between pre-sales and post-sales and have a underlying value system that when you create a business case till after that you have that same system tracking those outcomes over time in terms of success metrics, operational metrics, and then during the post sale cycle we prove that you achieve, and on top of that you are now recommending as well, which is where you can go next. And then the whole cycle repeats again. Now again you build, sell a new solution, and then you start tracking more metrics, and that cycle continues.
And I think that's exactly what it will be about, right? And I think what our learnings showed us exactly that what I explained earlier, right? So this value plan logic of having like one specific artifact, right? That helps you kind of continuously go back into that mode of selling, reselling, proving value, and always making sure that there's something tangible to get out of it. I think that makes perfect sense. We slowly have to come to an end, although I could do that for probably the next 2 hours and try to learn more about this whole discipline from you and your years of experience. Maybe as one of the last topics, what would be something where you think you've seen value initiatives fail, right? So what do you think is one of the like main areas where you think, okay, this is why these approaches fail and why this might not become successful for some companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I have seen, like not in our organization, but from within network, that but I have learned, where a lot of value, systems or value programs they fail is there is no sponsorship for these type of programs because there is no alignment, right? So alignment is the one thing that is needed for any it's not only about value, but any program to succeed within the organization, they have to have certain executive sponsorship, justification, proven, and I believe that is one of the biggest thing where there is no alignment with the seller organization, and then the lot of value programs, they just fail. And I'm talking about field facing value consulting programs and as well as the scale programs. So I think the alignment is the biggest area that need to be first tackled before you even start thinking about building a program.
Love it. So, Gaurav, we slowly have to come to an end. And I think as one of the last questions I would like to ask, and we just got a comment. Thank you, Maria. As a last thing which you could give the audience and every listener in the future to take home with, right? And to maybe digest a little bit over the next few days and weeks. So this will be the last thing, and you can also use that right away to say goodbye to our audience out there. If you had to bet on one emerging role or a specific skill that will define the future of value realization, what do you think that would be?
That's interesting. I see that a lot of in software industry and software engineers and product managers, everything is now like being renamed as forward deployed software engineer, right? Like I feel like that's the skill. I mean, each of us, in the value space should have. Like you can name it whatever, like forward deployed value synthesizer, something like that. So the big thing is that you have to be able to understand the customer context, right? So that's where your strategy consulting skills get into the picture. But in addition to that, it's not about only that. In addition to that, you need to understand, some product telemetry so that you can tie those business outcomes to the telemetry to understand how the things are moving, and at the same time, make your work easier by building some skills which you can scale within your value organization or at enterprise level. So it's a combination of all those skills that is going to be very useful into this space.
I love it. So thank you, Gaurav. It was really a great pleasure to reconnect with you. So we've been in conversations for a while now, and thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a lot of your experiences and knowledge. It was great seeing you, and we will surely stay in touch and get you on, hopefully in the future as well. So to everybody out there, that's a wrap for today. And I want to thank Gaurav for sharing his brilliant insights in how to operationalize value realization. To our audience, thank you for tuning in. You can find the show notes and links to Gaurav's work and ServiceNow in the description below. Please connect with Gaurav. He has a wealth of experience, so you can learn a lot from him on customer value engineering and realization. And until next time, remember, the journey never ends to customer value and beyond.